Good evening. Call this meeting to order of the Saco City Council for Monday, August 23rd, 2021. Let the record reflect that all councilors are present, including City Administrator Canrath and the Clerk, Michelle Hughes. With that, I'd like to invite everybody to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. At this time, under Section 4, we're going to bring up our state delegation for a legislative update. So let me begin with State Senator Donna Bailey, and then we'll hear from State Representative Maggie O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle and members of the Saco City Council. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm going to start out first just with kind of the highlights on those issues that I think would be of particular interest to you as a city council, and then I'm just going to update you on bills that I spoke with you about and or I heard from you all about at the start of session, and update you on where those are at. So first, as far as bills of interest to municipal government, I think most of these you probably have already heard of, but in case you haven't, the first item is that we did pass in the budget a path towards getting revenue sharing back to 5% by 2023. We also increased the reimbursement for the homestead exemption that again will get us to, eventually will get us to 100% reimbursement for the homestead exemption. A big deal was getting to 55% for funding for K through 12 education as approved by voters on numerous occasions. We also set aside money to fund universal school meals at no charge. This is something that started during the pandemic, as you're well aware of. As of right now, the federal government is continuing to fund that program, but we in the state passed a bill and set aside funds to continue it should the federal government not continue to fund it. Hopefully they will, but if they don't, we have a backup plan. And something that I fought very hard for in my role as a member of the Appropriations Committee is that we did finally set aside $45 million in the school revolving renovation fund, and as you know, that is the fund that Young School is now at the top of the list, and now there is money there, so good luck with that. I look forward to seeing the plans move forward on that project. Now moving to bills that I talked about or heard about from you all at the beginning of this session. First was a bill that was suggested to me by Mayor Doyle, and that is having to do with property tax exemptions for veterans. And the bill was to allow municipalities to make sure that all veterans in their community receive the full exemption amount, the full $6,000, despite any community valuations. As you know, the veterans exemption can fluctuate somewhat, and this would allow a municipality to, for example, the city of Saco to pass an ordinance to say, no matter what our valuation comes back at, we're gonna always give veterans the $6,000 exemption. And I'm pleased to say that that bill did pass, and it is now law, so now it's in your court, what you want to do with that. A bill that was suggested to me by Chief Clements, I don't know if he's here tonight, and then further discussed by some of the counselors here was a bill having to do with allowing municipal employees to opt into the main retirement system. beyond that first opportunity that you get. I mean, the way it's set up right now is you opt in at the beginning of your employment, or you can never opt in. So this was LD 1103, and it now allows employees to opt in up to 5 years after starting employment with an annual open enrollment. And that also did pass and became effective as of June 20th, 21. And then last, but certainly not least, I am just ecstatic that finally, after 5 years, fighting for this in the legislature, the property tax deferral program did finally pass and get funded. And just to refresh your memory, you've heard me talk about this, I think, every year I've come before you, but that is a program that allows the state to pay property taxes for seniors who qualify. There are both asset limitations and income limitations, as well as age limitations. But the state will pay the property taxes, and so the municipality gets their money, and the state gets a lien on the property and gets paid back when the property is either sold or the participant passes away. So I'm very proud of that, and proud that we finally got that funded and underway, and I think it will help a lot of seniors to be able to remain in their homes. So that's it for me, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Senator Bailey. Any questions for Senator Bailey? No questions. I just want to thank you for all the hard work you did up there. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from Representative O'Neill, and then we'll hear from Representative Copeland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come before you and connect about all the work that we've done this session. Just like it was for all of you, this was just a really, really different year. We did a lot of our work remotely, our committee work, and we would go in person in bursts to do our votes. So we had some challenges and some good things about that when it came to being able to include people in the process that we didn't usually hear from, but also, the challenges that came with not being able to be in person. So, similar things to share. A lot of our work focused on the pandemic. An influx of federal relief really helped us make investments that we've needed to make for a long time, and we were really grateful for that opportunity. As for a budget update for the next 2 years, we were glad to have Senator Bailey on the Appropriations Committee, and it's a great asset to our community to have that. Some policy items and accomplishments that are contained in the budget that Senator Bailey didn't mention but might be of interest to folks in the community are that we put resources toward workforce development via ARPA funds and recovery for businesses who are working to rebound from the pandemic that might not have received funds otherwise. We invested in broadband, affordable housing. There's $50 million, and then some refinancing that took place that opened up another $32 million. We created a main service fellows program that will incentivize more young people to be able to build their skills and be in communities. So there might be opportunities down the road. And we also put additional funds toward home weatherization and efficiency updates. Of note, locally, I worked with Thornton Academy on a number of issues where town academies just aren't treated the same way that a typical public high school would be. And those changes will benefit our communities and how we end up spending our funds. So we were glad that over the summer, TA and other stakeholders that we've teamed up with that have a similar situation with the town academy will be meeting with the Education Commissioner, Pender Macon, to discuss those items. And Senator Bailey has been helpful to that work in the Senate when it hits the chamber there. I was also glad to work with a number of local students on legislative proposals. I put it out to students that if they wanted to bring an idea, then I'd be happy to work with them. So I was really excited that they came with fully drafted proposals, that they had identified a problem. They did research on ways that we could solve that problem, and then we worked together on a solution and how we would draft the bill. And then they brought those bills up and testified at the public hearing, met with stakeholders to work those bills. So some of that work included, there are 10 in total, but ones that are of note to you all are a bill regarding municipal climate action. This bill builds on the work that SMS and TA students did last winter when they brought a proposal to declare a climate emergency at the municipal level. And over the past year, one student in particular has met with city staff. He might have met with some of you to identify what would be helpful to our community to meet climate goals. So he's been meeting with Howard Carter, the Conservation Commission, Energy, folks in transit, and he's been identifying places where, for example, a certain threshold of funding would help us access different programs or benefits. So if anyone's interested in that work, I'd love to loop you in on it and introduce you to the student who really has been leading this work. Regarding public transportation, we also had a bill about supporting a more robust transit network in the Saco, Biddeford, Old Orchard area. The folks at Transit provided information as we engaged in this work, and Representative Copeland also has been a great resource. We had an initial meeting this summer with folks at DOT, a representative from Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach, and the student leading this work. That student is now serving as a member of the Maine Climate Council's Transportation Working Group. So to put this on your radar and on the community's radar, DOT has offered to sit down with a stakeholder community group this fall. They're looking for communities that are really just prepared to bring ideas forward. So we'll have an opportunity to loop in folks from local government, from the community who'd like to be a part of those conversations. To pivot to traffic issues on my side of town where I live by the middle school. It's a really big one. So in order to support municipal efforts, the entire delegation has been staying up to date with folks at the Turnpike and DOT. I've been in regular communication with Turnpike Director Peter Mills to bring forward input from Saco residents about the coming Turnpike expansion. I worked with Director Fox to ensure that neighbors were notified about the coming changes, and I brought requests forward to Director Mills related to design and impacts to abutters. Director Mills has been responsive, and I'm really grateful for that. He's come down personally more than once to walk the area and speak with folks locally about any concerns they might have. And Senator Bailey touched on food insecurity. A lot of that work was front and center for me as chair of the Ag, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. We invested in a number of programs related to food insecurity, including our Harvest Bucks program, which it benefits, it helps people access local produce and then also benefits farms like the ones in town. For conservation, we made a historic investment in Land for Maine's Future. We hadn't made an investment of this size since 1999, so that was a really big deal for us to be able to do that. So the program provides grants to conserve land for recreation, wildlife habitat, working waterfront, water access, farmland. And a portion of Ferry Beach actually has been acquired with funding through that program. So something to keep an eye out for conservation-minded folks if we have projects ready in town that we could pursue. And I'll keep it short, but as for environmental and climate work, that's been a real focus for me in my committee work. I've been doing a lot of work to protect people from exposure to toxic substances. So there are a couple substances that won't be available anymore in certain situations that protect developing kids and pollinators and good stuff like that. And something also to mention on the climate front is that the legislature moved to protect, as you're well aware, municipal recycling and waste management programs by shifting costs off of taxpayers and onto manufacturers. And we also created some really great programs like the Green Bank, which is an accelerator to help finance emission reduction projects. So for next session, I think all of you know this really well, but I think it helps to spell it out on mic. We'll have some continued work to wrap up, and we'll continue our work in order to make it through the pandemic together. Right now, the process is starting on ARPA funds being made available in October. That's when the bill takes effect. But it'll be good for our community to keep our eye on what's in the ARPA bill and see if there are any opportunities that we could take advantage of right away, just because this really is a historic amount of money coming down from the federal government that might benefit our community. Next January, we're going to have a short session with a budget update. We'll update the biennial budget. And I think it'll be, just like this one, it'll be a little bit of a different session in the sense that we had to carry over a lot of our work. This is typically a short session, but we did have quite a few carryover bills. So that's really what we have, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you, and please reach out if there's any way that I can support your work. We really appreciate the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative O'Neill? Thank you for all your hard work. Now we'll hear from Representative Copeland.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, Mr. Mayor, and it's been my honor to represent House District 14. I was sworn in last December in the midst of the pandemic and worked remotely, and that was challenging for all of us in all kinds of ways that we know. But we worked together in the 130th legislature, and we accomplished a lot for the people of Maine, and I'm really proud of the work that's done there. With passion and persistence, I sponsored LD 946, which is a resolve regarding the shore damage mitigation project in Saco Bay. I'm grateful that representatives and senators from all 4 communities with shoreline on the Saco Bay were co-sponsors. They include Senator Donna Bailey, Senator Susan DeChambeau, Lori Gramlich of Old Orchard, Lydia Bloom of the town of York, Speaker Ryan Fecto of Biddeford, Maggie O'Neill of Saco, of course. Thank you, Maggie. And Erin Sheehan of Biddeford and Sophie Warren of Scarborough. So I was really happy that all the communities came together. And this legislation is really about the local community, the state, and the federal government working together. And I'm really proud of it. Here's how it reads. Resolved, that the governor shall take all actions the governor considers necessary to assist and support the city of Saco in the city of Saco's role as the non-federal, I think we got the wrong one here. All right, non-federal sponsor with the United States Army Corps of Engineers under the Federal River and Harbor Act of 1968, Section 111, as amended. 33 United States Code, Section 426I, for the shore damage mitigation project for the Saco River and Camp Ellis Beach in Saco, pursuant to the report dated July 2017, also known as Alternative 6, which may include directing any relevant state agencies to assist the City of Saco in entering into a project partnership agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers for the construction of the project under this section, and directing any relevant state agencies to assist and support the City of Saco and other communities on Saco Bay in the construction of the project under this section and in implementing other beach and beach habitat remediation projects in and around Saco Bay as recommended by the Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry, Bureau of Resource Information, and Land Use Planning, Division of Geology, Natural Areas and Coastal Resources, Maine Geological Survey, including dune planting projects. So that's what it reads, but what it means is that the state is behind the city of Saco and the other communities on Saco Bay. So it just brings resources to us. So the Attorney General is not going to be the attorney for the city of Saco, but they do have the Ferry Beach State Park. So they have interest here. And so the Attorney General's office will be looking along with the city of Saco to make sure that everything is going well for their stake in it. We also have the amazing folks in the, Peter Slavinsky. I'm sure you've heard the name many times. He comes and does the jet ski thing, measures the shores, comes up with amazing research and data and reports, many of which he works very closely with the Shoreline Commission in Saco. So that information is totally important. And with this language, we have them at our disposal. So if any engineering or any ideas about shore mitigation problems, I know Peter Slavinsky is talking a lot about dune plantings, back of dune plantings. So that's one way. And we talked about, there's also the living shorelines issue, and maybe the state can help out in some way at some point if it's needed. So I just think it brings a lot of resources to the city of Saco. And I'm happy to report that that resolve passed through the legislature and has been signed by the governor and will be in effect on October 18th, 2021, with all the other bills. That's the date when it's like 90 days past the end of the closing of the session. Two other legislative documents I co-sponsored are LD 924, which is a resolve to establish a task force to study the coordination of services and expansion of educational programs and vocational opportunities for young adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities or acquired brain injuries. The other is LD 1268. It's an act to provide greater access to treatment for serious mental illness by restricting prescription drug utilization management by an insurance carrier. So, I think that's going to really help the people of Maine. I know that mental illness, especially in these times in the pandemic, and we heard it in the Olympics, it's, something that we can talk about and we can help people. So overall, the 130th Maine legislature passed legislation on many issues that face Mainers. I know Donna and Senator Bailey and Representative O'Neill did a good job of talking about a lot of specific ones. I'm just going to give you a general 35,000-foot overview. So here are some examples of what was passed. So we passed legislation to raise municipal revenue sharing from 3.75 to 4.5% in fiscal year 2022 and 5% in fiscal year 2023 to lower taxes. We passed legislation to fulfill the state's public education funding to 55%. And expand career and technical education, provide free breakfast and lunch, improve access to childcare and preschool, and support students with disabilities. We passed legislation to ramp up land conservation efforts, support climate resilience and emission reduction projects, provide weatherization funding, encourage the use of electric vehicles, divest from fossil fuel companies, improve energy utilities, and reform our recycling system. We also passed legislation that puts equity at the heart of our policymaking, and we passed legislation to require racial impact statements within the legislative process. So in other words, if you have a bill and everybody wants to know how much money it costs, we have something called a fiscal note that the analysts come up and decide how much it's going to cost. So this puts the same thing on issues that might have to do with racial impacts, and the analysts will go through the process and they'll decide whether it applies to the bills, just so that the legislators can go in informed and understand it, because, we may not, as a state with 94% white people, we need to understand other perspectives, and this will help us in that. And it'll help advance fair chance employment, preserve fair housing, require data collection on healthcare disparities, and improve voter accessibility to ensure that all eligible voters can cast their vote. We passed legislation to facilitate Maine's economic recovery from the pandemic, support the healthcare system, alleviate disparities in public health outcomes, provide support for senior living facilities, invest in workforce development. We passed legislation to extend regular dental care to an estimated 217,000 Mainers, to address the shortages of healthcare workers and essential support workers, alleviate disparities in public health outcomes, improve access to substance use disorder services. We passed legislation to bolster Maine's heritage industries and expand broadband, fund affordable housing, and develop a strong, diverse workforce that allows businesses to thrive. We passed legislation that supports programming to divert young people from entering the criminal justice system. So that's the key, it's prevent them before they even get there. And that's, we have funded community-based services for the people who need mental health, behavioral health, and substance use services, increase government accountability, improve data collection, eliminate criminal penalties for having hypodermic apparatuses, and study restorative justice policies. I'm happy to go into further detail individually on any of these and more, and I'll leave my business cards here for you to take. I'm your representative and City Council and everyone in Saco in District 14. Your input is critical to me. So communication with me is very important, letting me know what your community, your wards are needing and what our community needs that you hear about. I'd be happy to help with any of those issues. I think it was Representative O'Neill said the legislature will be in session for a day or two in September, and then in January we're going to continue our work on behalf of the people of Maine. I've learned that with collaboration, dedication, and hard work, so much is possible, and I remain proud to represent you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Copeland? Thank you, Representative Copeland.
Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator
We would
Kim.
like to just take a brief moment to recognize now Representative Copeland for her service in the Saco City Council. And we have a gift to present to her. So, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to get
Sure.
to the podium, and I believe we're going to take a quick picture with Andrew. By all means, by all means. Perfect.
Just realized something. The amendment that I put in to give the mayor power to fill the seat if 30 days goes by, it's not in the packet.
Thank you very much.
The one that I brought up to Michelle, and the should review.
Thank you very much for that. That clock has been sitting in Brian's office for quite some time and hasn't been helping you manage your time between the community and Augusta. So hopefully it will help you from this point forward, and we're very grateful to your service to the community as a city councilor and now as a representative, and we're always grateful for all of our delegation members and the great sacrifices that they make day in and day out for our community. So thank you very much. With that, we move on to item 5 of the agenda, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? Councilor Hatch.
Yes, I'd like to report on 2 committees. On August 11th, the Cable Committee met. I just wanted to report that they are carefully monitoring our contract with Spectrum, have actually engaged in an audit that seems to have uncovered some potential for underpayment, so that issue is being resolved as we speak, and kudos to our staff for monitoring that so closely. And then on August 19th, I was part of the Traffic Safety Committee. I serve on that committee with Councilor Johnston. He graciously allowed me to report on last week's meeting. Vehicular speeding continues to be a consistent problem not only within the city of Saco, but just about everywhere. The Traffic Safety Committee continues to receive numerous complaints from citizens regarding excessive vehicular speeds being witnessed on many city roadways, particularly those that act as major connectors to large traffic arteries. In my opinion, the easiest way to mitigate this problem is through individual self-control and personal responsibility while adhering to posted speed limits, but at the moment this option does not seem to be working very well. I just want to assure the public that the issue of excessive vehicular speed is on our city streets is on the Traffic Safety Committee's radar screen, and there's no pun intended. Our police department and public works department are working hard to deploy their resources to address the problem the best that they can, while simultaneously trying to find a more effective set of remedies. And that task is not an easy one, as I have come to learn. So I just wanted the public to know that we are trying to address those issues. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further committee correspondence? Moving on to item 6 of the agenda, and that is public comment. We have, in the public comment sign-up sheet, we have Jane Karen. I'd like to invite Jane up to speak. Again, for those using the microphone, please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Thank you for this time. My name is Jane Karen, 264 Lincoln Street, Ward 5, Saco, Maine. And I just wanted to comment on some of the packet information concerning the revisiting the Clair property. It reads as though this will protect the opportunity for the city of Saco to retain some of the property if needed for the schools. And I think it's very, very important that it be clearly outlined for the citizens exactly how that might happen. I think with last council meeting, there may be some miscommunication, and some may have more information than others. I'm not privy to that. But in order to build that trust with the citizens, I think it's very important that that be considered. And that is a top priority. The wastewater treatment, I think, is second priority because of the environmental impact. But that school situation for our citizens has gone on so long that the individuals in our city need that information from the council. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all that signed up. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak?
Hello, Kevin Roach, 18 Vines Road. I'm here for the marijuana discussion. No? No, we're not talking? Okay, just kidding. First off, I'm here to thank all council overall, mayor, and the councilors that came to our SOS Saco Bay meeting on Saturday. Under 4, so kept it under a quorum, so that was good. perfect 3. So thank you. As we go forward, as we discussed at the meeting, that there might not be any news besides what we're trying to get for, say, the dredge or living shoreline solutions. So as much communication that can happen between the city and you as counselors, but also counselors to the city, ask the questions back too, if there's anything. But right now, we're kind of in a hurry up and wait right now. So the only other subject I wanted to talk about was, I think what Ms. Karen just said, the land at the Clair Parcels. As long as the language is clear that, there's potential for school use, we're not saying that that's where schools are going. I want to reiterate that leverage is key. Business 101. You don't, even if you were going to sell it for a set amount to go buy other land, you've kind of announced the set amount to the market, and so the market will play the city accordingly. So it's a tough situation because you don't know what interests are coming in, and you want all options on the table. But what I'm going to say from the school side, as being part of the school committee, the school construction committee, is that the message I got from being invited by our superintendent to go up to Augusta and talk to the Department of Education is that you want to get a robust outreach to the community to know what inventory you have and see what inventory could be out there. So you want to be careful of the message you send to the community by saying, oh, by the way, we're going to sell city land too. So as long as your language tonight, I don't know if there's amendments or it is what it is, it's, as long as it's clear to the market and to the school construction committee that that is going to be the land can be available for schools, it's on the table, and that's all we're asking. All of the above, let's get this new school site and process going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Moving on to item 7 of the agenda, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for August 9th, 2021?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll call vote on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Moves on to item 8, the consent items. There are 3 items for tonight's agenda. A, confirm mayor's appointment to the PACTS Policy Board of Pat Fox. Item B, application for solid waste permit for Doyon's Property Maintenance and Landscaping, Inc. And item C, September council meeting date changes. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Roll call vote on the consent agenda. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to action items, which is agenda item 9, and that is item A on page 7 of the packet, a public hearing order authorizing the city of Saco to borrow an amount not to exceed $50 million and apply for and accept state and federal grants and funding, if available, to construct and equip a full water resource recovery facility upgrade located on Front Street. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The WRRD facility on Front Street is prone to hydraulic backups, consistent of aging infrastructure built on elevations susceptible to sea level rise, is not equipped to meet anticipated regulatory requirements, and is not equipped to support community growth. For these reasons and more, over the past 2 years, the WRRD has been studying these impacts and planning for its long-term health. The Coastal Resiliency Ad Hoc Committee, WRRD, and the Communications Department partnered with the U.S. EPA to evaluate site alternatives, and the site design with the highest benefit-cost ratio was chosen. At its August 9th meeting, the City Council approved the first reading and scheduled a public hearing on this item. I move to open the public hearing regarding the order presented at this meeting, which is entitled Order Authorizing the City of Saco to Borrow an Amount Not to Exceed $50 million and to apply for and accept state and federal grants and funding, if available, to construct and equip a full water resource recovery facility upgrade located on Front Street.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on opening the public hearing? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing. The public hearing is now open at 7:11 p.m. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on the order authorizing the City of Saco to borrow an amount not to exceed $50 million?
Hello, my name is Jane Karen, 264 Lincoln Street, Saco. And I think this is a critically important action for the city of Saco to protect the environment, the citizens' homes, and so forth. And I do support this, and my only concern is that we've waited so very long per school that the education and communication to the citizens of Saco needs to be very clear so that both of these projects are going to be approved and seen through completion. So that's a big concern. It's not just mine. You hear it all through the city. So that's the only thing that I'm concerned about, and that communication needs to happen.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to close the public hearing and schedule the final reading on August 30th, 2021, regarding the order presented at this meeting, which is entitled Order Authorizing the City of Saco to Borrow an Amount Not to Exceed $50 million and to apply for and accept state and federal grants and funding, if available, to construct and equip a full water resource recovery facility upgrade located on Front Street.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote to close the public hearing and set final reading. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item B, which is on page 16 in your packet, a tabled motion from August 9, 2021, reconsideration of a vote on Clair Parcels. Is there a motion to untable?
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Second to untable, Councilor Berman. Any discussion on untabling? Roll call vote to untable, Councilor Archer?
Abstain for the same reasons of the last meeting.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion passes 5-1-1. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council at their July 26, 2021 meeting took action and a vote on the sale of the Clair parcels. That motion to sell the Clair parcel failed. In response to a vote taken at the City Council's July 26, 2021 meeting on the action item, final reading, Chapter 81, Conveyance of City-Owned Property, Clair Parcels, and an inquiry from Deputy Mayor Jody McPhail on the sale of the Clair parcels is in the future, including the ability to have a portion of these properties retained for school or for the fire department use. City staff offered a response and alternative to the main vote. These considerations, including a consult with City Attorney Tim Murphy, were outlined in a memo to the City Council for the August 9, 2021 meeting. The City Council, at their August 9, 2021 meeting, entertained the following motion. I move that the City Council authorize the City Administrator to sell 841 to 853 Portland Road through a request for proposals, RFP process, and that the sale of these parcels include the ability, if needed, for the city to retain a portion of these parcels for municipal or school purposes, and that the top 3 RFPs come back to the City Council for review and recommendation at the City Council executive session. The intention of this recommended motion included the following. 1, to continue with the process of selling the parcels in a timely manner. 2, market indicators are showing promise with the increase in the property's value. 3, the completed market analysis recommends the sale of these parcels rather than the city hold the parcel for development of a business park. 4, the Economic Development Commission recommended that the city sell these parcels. 5, to date, city staff has received several confidential, serious inquiries for potential development. 6, contrary to some perceptions, there are no specific plans nor any specific idea for the development of these parcels. 7, the sale of these parcels to developers with the new recommended motion to include the ability to retain a portion of the property for municipal or school use could move forward without impeding the sale, as many of the developers have confidentially discussed their interest of a public-private partnership. 8, including the ability for the council to continue to be involved by authorizing the city administrator with city staff to sell the parcels through an RFP process and provide the council with the confidential review of the top 3 proposals in an executive session to provide guidance on the sale of the parcels. In addition, city councilors requested legal opinion on the reconsideration vote, and that request was made to City Attorney Tim Murphy. Legal opinions were made and are provided in the attached email correspondence. In response to the question with regard to the 1-year time frame, statement made by city staff was inaccurate and dealt more with the 2-year time frame with contract zone revisits with the planning board. I move that the city council authorizes the city administrator to sell 841 to 853 Portland Road through a request for proposal, RFP process, and that the sale of these parcels include the ability, if needed, for the city to retain a portion of the parcels for municipal or school purpose, and that the top 3 RFPs come back to the city council for review and recommendation at a city council executive session.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard Councilor Gunn first, or Councilor Purdy. Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. To, I guess, circle back to last week, specifically to Section 2.8E of the Charter, I appreciate Mr. Murphy's opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I did myself check with several people in the city of Saco that have many years of experience with the city charter, and they all certainly believe the intent of that section is anything unnoticed shouldn't appear before or on an agenda. I mean, I think it's not very difficult to meet the 48-hour deadline. We require it of city staff on the regular. So, I mean, we certainly can try and legalese our way into making this fit. I personally feel that that tends to be the case more often than not recently. But, I mean, clearly, you know, council and the mayor moved that motion forward last week, so we're kind of done with that at this point, you know, unless it's challenged in court. As for the motion before us, I stand by my comments of several weeks ago on this. I mean, I think that waiting for the school construction committee, which we'll have our first meeting next week, actually, we just received notice of that, to at least do the inventory study before moving this forward. I mean, my understanding is that Councilor McPhail was under the impression that there was some kind of time limit on this, which was inaccurate, and I stated that last week too. So I understand we're trying to address that in the motion and allow, you know, a portion of the land to be set aside, but how do we sit here today presently and know how many acreage or how much acreage is going to be needed to set, aside. As I've stated at least several times previously, and I believe the superintendent himself just recently stated this at a school board meeting, the minimum is 20 acres. And my research dating back to 2014, when I was on the first school construction committee, really found that all new schools in the last 20 years in the state of Maine are a minimum of 40. It's really what the state wants in order to be able to address all the needs and to accommodate potential future growth. So again, I don't really understand how we're going to put that in a motion and then sell the land and try to hold a landowner, to our needs after the fact. It just doesn't make sense to me. Furthermore, I've stated this previously, I don't like the process that we've used here. Chapter 81 review, we had interested parties that could have come forward, whether it was an executive session or what have you. We could have heard what they had to say, then initiated the Chapter 81 review. This, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, was not initiated by any member of the city council. It came from city staff. So for me, I wonder, what's the motive there? And I'm not saying it's anything nefarious, but why wasn't this addressed with council first before moving this forward to a process where we're now discussing currently selling a piece of land with no real understanding as to why? The public has had their only option to weigh in on it several weeks ago. How are they going to weigh in on something if they don't understand what we're selling or what for? This, again, as I've stated, was a similar process we used with the DPW site, which to this day I still hear, granted it was only a little over a year ago, but I still hear, oh, when did that happen, from members of the public, which again, when it comes to matters of transparency, it's rather, really personal for me. I think that, operating in the shadows, even if it's not really in the shadows, but the perception is amongst the public, is concerning. Like I said, I think that, at least hearing out, or at least getting through that school construction process, it probably will only take 2 or 3 months to do the site inventory, and then going forward with this makes more sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Councilor Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding of this proposal is that it strikes a compromise between those two issues. By putting it out for an RFP process, the process of requesting proposals, accepting them, weighing them, and bringing them to council for input can be a several-month process. By the time that process goes forward, we should have a pretty good idea of what the school needs are. I find it unlikely the schools will need this property, although not impossible, and if so, then the council will reject those proposals and look for one that accommodates the school needs. It is entirely possible that the city will need the revenues from the sale of these properties to accommodate additional property purchase or school construction. This allows that flexibility also. An immediate sale allows none of that flexibility. It doesn't allow us, putting it to a broker doesn't allow us to consider the school needs before it goes for sale, doesn't allow us to adjust our response to those proposals to meet current needs several months down the line. This process is designed to allow us to serve the schools if needed, to raise the revenue if needed, and to match the current needs of the city at the time those needs are known. I think it's an elegant solution to a complex problem, one that wasn't thought of in time for the initial reading, came up later, and now is available to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To address Councilor Johnston, I did some research this weekend over the average countrywide size of acreage needed for schools, and my calculations kind of came on track with that. For an elementary school, it is 10 acres plus 1 acre for every 100 children. A junior high school is 20 acres with 1 acre for every 100 children. So depending on how we determine the school situation and what is actually going to be needed and what will be built, we'd be looking at roughly 22 acres for an elementary and 32 acres for a junior high, if the potential of them being combined. We also know that there's some wetland in the property area as well, which could diminish the actual useful size of the property. I would actually be willing to amend the motion to add that we retain 35 acres for the school consideration, and then be able to look at the other portion for the sale, and put an actual a minimum acreage that we would keep aside.
Motion, is that a motion?
Yeah, yes.
Councilor McPhail has amended her motion, provided the amendment that the city retain 35 acres. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilor Gunn. So the amendment to keep 35 acres, presented by Councilor McPhail, second by Councilor Gunn. On the amendment, any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Hatch, then Councilor Johnston. Councilor Hatch.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear here. Are we going to keep a minimum of 35 acres, or are we going to keep 35 acres? Because if we, whatever reason, through other calculations, determine that we need 40 acres, then we've hamstrung ourselves here in the language. So I'm having a little difficulty with the motion in terms of its definitive 35 acres. I think the word minimum needs to be in there, and to expand on that, minimum 35 acres or whatever the city of Saco deems necessary to build a school. And one other point I'd like to make is that we need to be, and it's to Mr. Rocha's point, this language, whatever language we come up with, needs to be incredibly clear and effective and reflective of the intent. And I only say that because I've sort of witnessed on a few occasions where we have intent to do something and it isn't really clear in the language that's supposed to support that. So I would also caution us to be extremely careful in the wording of how this gets laid out. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston, then Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. While I certainly can, respect and even appreciate the intent of the motion, as I stated earlier, we haven't even had one meeting. We have no understanding of how we're going to do grade configuration. We could be doing K through 8 for all I know at this point. So we have no understanding of how much acreage we need. So we may set 35 acres aside and then find we have no need for it. So why impede the process is how I look at this. Just wait. We probably won't need this land. I've sat up here for weeks now and said that I don't think it's probably, the best location. But I've spent many, many, many hours going through the city, all of our maps, trying to find a location that is going to support what I think the people of this community want. And I've yet to really find a location that has sewer and water readily available. This one does. I'm not saying it's the best suited, but it might be the only location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McPhail.
Oh, thank you. To Mr. Hatch, Councilor Hatch's point, that is, we have the benefit of having 2 counselors on the school construction committee that will be able to keep us informed and up to date. And as soon as, and that's part of the process of it coming back to city council through executive session, is that we are able to look at it based on the information that we have at the time, as we're getting updates through the construction committee, knowing where we stand with it. And again, keeping us informed and us in the process allows us to work to the best solution for the children of the school system, the parents, as well as the taxpayers and the city itself. And that was basically the intent of my putting this forward after revisiting it and looking at it. And unfortunately, it was not until the Friday before our meeting that I was able to get the answers that I needed. And again, I just think that it really creates the city and the parents and the construction committee working together to find the best solution for everybody.
Thank you. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to start off by saying now that our city attorney's opinion is now officially on the floor, I will vote now. I've been abstaining without that, but now that that opinion is now officially in our packet and on the floor. Again, I disagree with him, and I'll get into where I'm going right now. But I was just presenting to you, I will be voting, and I wanted to let you know why now I'm voting, is because now the opinion is on the floor. Even though I disagree with it, I think it sets a dangerous precedent, I will be voting.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Mayor,
City Administrator
if
Cantorth.
we could have Director Clavette come up to talk about some of the lots. I think one is only 45 acres, actually. So Denise, can you just comment, just for some information for the council on the acreage?
Yes, if you take a look at the sales approach and the acreage that it is.
Please, maybe pull down the microphone a
I'm
little
so sorry. I am a little bit on the challenge side when it comes to the height department, humorously. If you take a look at the parcels right now, the three of them together, there are approximately 38 to 41 acres of upland property that are usable. And so if you mark off 35 for schools, you basically are leaving a handful of acreage for the parcels. So it's better to say that we will work with the partners, whoever the developer is, and leave that open-ended depending on the acreage that's needed. There's, without disclosing abutters, but there are other parties that are interested that are in the proximate area that could actually work and add some other property as well to this purchase. But if you take a look at it, the acreage for the Clair parcels of 6 lots is 54 acres, 38 to 41 upland. And then it's broken out further into the subject parcels. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of the total usable acreage.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment, to hold a minimum of 35 acres? On the amendment, roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer?
No?
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
No.
Councilor Hatch?
No.
Councilor McPhail?
Based on the information, Director Clavette, no.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion fails, 6-1. Or excuse me, the amendment fails. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? Councilor Archer?
Again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but courts look at process, and the process was not followed here. It is, I don't want to say likely that we'll be seeing this as a suit, but there was a discussion on it because we're not following process. Again, I'm not going to beat the dead horse there, but I mean, we don't need another lawsuit. So that is my concern at this time.
Thank you. Any further discussion? On the main motion, roll call vote on the main motion. Councilor Archer?
No.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
No.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion passes 4-3. Brings us to item C of the agenda, another tabled motion from August 9, 2021, on page 23 in your packet. Is there a motion to untable? This is the one reading acceptance of wage and compensation survey. Councilor Archer, untable. Is there a second? Untable?
Second.
Second by, I think Councilor Hatch and Councilor McPhail was a tie, but we'll take out Councilor Hatch. Roll call vote on table. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion on table passes 7-0. Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Saco partnered with MRI to conduct a wage and compensation analysis following a request for a proposal process. Over a few months, city staff worked closely with MRI to review wages and benefit offerings from identified comparable communities. As you'll see in the letter of transmittal and report, the study provides Saco with a comprehensive review of the classification and compensation practices for the existing non-union positions and a positive structured system to utilize that provides an equitable plan moving forward. Additionally, the survey data provided union positions have been beneficial during negotiations. According to Granfield, you will observe in this report the Saco is well positioned with the comparable communities due to the City Council's cost of living adjustment strategy in recent years. Administrating the 3% COLA for the last few years has kept Saco competitive with neighboring communities. This report is helpful, providing a foundation structure to ensure fair and equitable compensation decisions. The compensation chart will be updated yearly to reflect any COLA increases that the City Council approves. Be it authorized that the City Council adopt the City of Saco Compensation and Classification Study dated June 21, 2021.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? City Administrator Canrath?
Thank you. I was just going to say, just of note, this full document in its entirety is posted along with the packet in the other documents section of the website. And as was in the item of commentary, I just want to say that this was good news, really, and it showed most of our wages are fairly in line with the market. We've been able to keep pace because of the 3% COLA increases that we have done over the last number of years. But the biggest thing I think this report has given us is it has given us a classification plan with 16 steps that's going to help us with onboarding new employees and where to put them. We have been really lacking that totally. So that's a major piece of this, and we will update that obviously in the future as the COLA increases transpire. So overall, this is going to be a very useful report for us, and also good news showing our wages are currently market competitive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So I had asked it be tabled because I hadn't actually received it previously, and I did go back and check my email, and I hadn't received it. So I appreciate it being made available, but could we just hyperlink it next time? Because I still found it kind of challenging, as you just described, to actually find it if you're looking for it. So just going forward, if we could add the hyperlink to future plans. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? Roll call vote on item C. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item D, page 26 here, packet, one reading, reaffirming existing Chapter 176 permit agreements. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Saco has several existing permit agreements with property owners that reference what will soon be the previous sewer ordinance. These agreements will be updated over time to reflect the redrafted ordinance, and new permit agreements will be written with updated ordinance references. At this time, the City Council is asked to make the suggested motion to reaffirm the validity of existing Chapter 176 permit agreements. Be it ordered that the City Council reaffirm existing Chapter 176 permit agreements, and that these agreements referencing existing Chapter 176 sewer ordinances shall remain in full force and effect with currently indicated provisions of each individual agreement until such time as the respective indicated expiration date of each agreement. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item E, a final reading, Chapter 176 Sewer Ordinance, repeal existing Chapter 176 and replace with rewritten sewer ordinance to be codified as Chapter 176, page 28 in your packet. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since summer of 2019, the WRRD staff and the consultant have been rewriting Chapter 176 of the city ordinances. This proposed rewrite better aligns the city local ordinance with state requirements of its main pollutant discharge elimination system permit, federal requirements of the Clean Water Act, and best practices for the EPA. This revision incorporates an updated impact fee schedule and other revisions based on months of research. I move to approve the final reading regarding the following order. Be it ordered that the City Council repeals existing Chapter 176 of the city's ordinances and hereby ordains the redrafted Chapter 176 and presented at the public hearing and shall be adopted in place of the existing ordinance in its entirety.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? Seeing no hands raised, nobody seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item F, which is a final reading, Article 19, Historic Preservation Amendments, on page 93 in your packet. That was assigned to Councilor Gunn. However, he has pulled his council liaison in order to speak on the motion. So is there somebody that's willing to read the motion? If nobody reads the motion, the amendment or the motion dies, and we don't have to deal with it.
Can you just restate what you said? I'm trying to understand it better.
Councilor Gunn has decided not to be the council liaison to read into the record to speak against the issue.
Oh, to speak
And so therefore, if there's,
I will read it just for this purpose.
thank you. Councilor Archer?
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. At their meeting on September 23rd, 2020, the HPC directed staff to initiate the process to amend the HPC, or the Historic Preservation Chapter of the zoning ordinance, previously known as 2030 TAC 413, now known as Article 19. The HPC has spent the past several months discussing and workshopping proposed changes. Highlights of the proposed changes include ability for the City Council to create a historic landscape district in order to protect historically and culturally significant parks and open spaces, requirement for landmarks listed on the National Register of Historic Places to undergo certificate of appropriateness review for qualified exterior changes. Specific material preferences for new construction are now noted. Additional clarification regarding which exterior changes require certificate of appropriateness review, requirements for changes to public improvements, for example, sidewalks within the historic district to undergo certificate of appropriateness review. The HPC held a public hearing on these proposed changes during their April 14th, 2021 meeting and voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for adoption of the amendments as drafted. The Planning Board held a public hearing on the proposed changes during their meeting on June 1st, 2021, and voted unanimously to forward a positive recommendation for adoption of the amendments, but noted that they recommend removing 72 Grant Road property from the list of National Registered listed properties that would require local review, as the historic significance of that property lies within the interior of the structure and not the exterior. Some minor clerical changes that were brought up during the first reading on this item have been made to the proposed red line document. No substantive changes have been made at this time. On August 9th, 2021, the council voted to remove 72 Grant Street from the list of historic landmarks. This change is reflected in the final document. I move to repeal the existing Section 2030 TAC 413 of the zoning ordinance Historic Preservation Overlay District and replace it by the enactment of the amended Section 2030 TAC 413 dated August 12th, 2021.
Thank you. Councilor Archer has made the motion. If there's no second, the motion would die. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion is dead. Moving on to item G of the agenda. That is a first reading, budget amendment number 2, Route 1 traffic improvements on page 139 in your packet. Councilor Archer.
Yeah, it's just trying to get to it. 1 second. The City of Saco has entered into a purchase and sale agreement to purchase the house at 2 Hillview Ave in order to reconfigure the Jenkins Road intersection. The purchase price is $390,000 and $150,000 in TIF funds is earmarked for the project in this year's TIF budget. The amendment funds the balance of the purchase cost in the amount of $240,000. Be it ordered, the City Council approves the first reading of Budget Amendment Number 2, Fiscal Year 2022, and moves to schedule a second and final reading for August 30th, 2021. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Seeing nobody seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item H of the agenda, a first reading, Charter Amendment Number 3, Section 6.15, borrowing for permanent improvements, on page 141 in your packet. Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter, as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment allows greater flexibility in how to finance bonded debt issuance by removing the requirement that principal payments be in equal or descending amounts in multiples of 5,000. This will reduce the upfront load on the taxpayer or future issuances by allowing for level total payments, principal plus interest over time. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the Charter Amendment included in this document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Borrowing for Permanent Improvements, dated June 2nd, 2021, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motions have been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Any discussion? City Administrator Kenrath?
Briefly interrupt, I'm sorry. City Clerk Hughes, just a quick question for you. Is September 7th the correct date, or should this be August 30th? I know we had some. Okay, thank you. Just confirming. Thank you.
Any discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yeah, so just bear with me for a moment. My statement's going to apply to all of our charter amendments after the email we received from our city clerk, Michelle Hughes. None of this is on the content of the amendments. It's about timing. My major concern is going to be waste of our resources, and I'll explain, is that when you go and look, we need 30% of the last gubernatorial votes. I've done the research back in these are non-federal, non-state years. Again, this is just when you have council and local business going on. 4 years ago, there were 2,290 votes total for wards 1, 3, and 6, and those are the wards that are up this year. 2019, 1,252 total votes in those areas. When you look at the gubernatorial, our most recent was 9,279 citizens voted. 30% mark equals 3,092. Even in the best of times 4 years ago, or when you had that positive number of 2,290, we would still need about 1,000 extra people to come out. If we use our 2019 votes, you're looking at 2,000 additional people coming out that aren't voting for a city councilor, who would just pretty much be coming out for these budget amendments. And as we know, public participation is strong some years and not as strong other years. So again, my concern isn't the content, and I'm not going to go over this each charter amendment, but I'm going to apply this principle to each one of these. When we go and put a budget amendment on the floor, not a budget amendment, my apologies, we just did it. Our charter amendment on the floor, you must publish that in the newspaper. And City Administrator, would you say it's fair to just average it at $500 per? Well, actually, this is going to be more significant.
It's not cheap, but the city clerk can give you probably some more exact figures.
So these, and since we have the clerk here, which is awesome, could you estimate what it's going to cost just to get these into the newspaper alone?
The ad that I just did for section 2.06 vacancy and 4.01 vacancy, that was $900.
So we're talking about 10 grand is a good quick estimate, not going to hold you to it. Just in these budget amendments, plus staff resources, plus staff time, is significant. This is more about the timing than it is the content. Are we going to get these 3,000 votes knowing that wards 1, 3, and 6 are the only ones that are going to be coming for a city council There is no state, there is no federal.
It's going to be close. The state of Maine will be having 3 questions on there. One of them will be the CMP question. There'll be a bond question, and then there's also another question about allowing people to raise their own food. So a citizen initiative. So it will be those 3.
And that's what's going to make it close. But the council race by default is probably not going to get there, but the state, when I was saying state, I was talking about gubernatorial, and I was thinking of state legislation, not necessarily these 3 questions. Again, these fail. I believe our new precedent is we're only going to have the numbers for presidential elections. That's just a gut. It's not backed by facts. But based on we have this high standard, I guess is going to be a good cause, knowing that not all 7 seats are up. My concern is staff resources, staff times, because you're going to put it in the newspaper in a couple weeks, and then you're going to have to do it one more time, or do you not have to do it near the election?
No, it will go in one more time.
So we're looking closer to 20,000 now to just publish these budget amendments that we may not even have enough voters.
It'll go in for just for the public hearing.
Okay, so
So
once.
once, yes,
And that applies to the vote in November.
correct.
You don't have to do it twice.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, then I retract back to 10,000.
The gubernatorial elections, I expect that we'll have a higher turnout for that next year.
Yes, of course. I'm just thinking that because this is an off year, it's highly likely we may not even meet the standard. And my concern is just resources being expended to include staff time. So,
We also have several school board races on the ballot as well. So
okay.
that may drive out some folks as well.
And that gets us to the close, so.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councilor Archer. I actually had reservations about this prior to being it confirmed that there was a threshold we had to meet. I certainly think with this amount, I think there's 10 amendments. That was really concerning to me that we potentially could be, amending the charter with an insignificant amount of voters, given that, we've gone to staggered terms and really it's kind of exposed a glaring issue I wish we had foreseen when we actually did those charter changes, because it is going to be, and I could be wrong, but just based off historic, voter turnout, the idea of only having a handful of wards each year vote, absent a mayoral election, which obviously tends to drive out all voters. And then you add into the fact that, as of right now, we have very few contested seats to begin with. I don't think we'll have that great of a turnout. But thank you.
Thank you. Any, Councilor Archer?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up with, I am willing, because again, it's about the public benefit, it's about voting, to push these forward, to vote for them. I just ask that there's a significant public outreach effort from the city. I'm not going to hold you to it, but I'll vote yes. But these are my concerns, that all these budget amendment, charter amendments may fail just because of lack of, in voting aspects, lack of a quorum, I guess is a good way to say it. But I'm willing to put forward, we need to get out there and what do they call it, rock the vote, or what was that old, early 2000s, they had that campaign. Something to that nature. I think in order to get these forward this year, some public education is needed. So I will vote yes on these with my reservations, but.
Thank you, Councilor Archer. Again, these are not set in stone. You cannot approve these and wait till next year during the gubernatorial election that might have a bigger populace come out to vote. But just remember, you're sticking with that forfeiture of office language that has been problematic in the sense that we were trying to clear up. But if you want to live under the current charter to make sure that we don't miss the target, that's something that you all can undertake and decide on here tonight and in the next couple of meetings. But that That's where we are. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councilor Archer's point, I can definitely speak for myself. I won't assume to speak for you and Councilor McPhail, though, that when I'm out there campaigning, as much as I talk about, what I'd like to do, though, I like to also talk about what the council does as a whole, because the council acts as one body. And since I'm a good government type person in the sense of having an ordered, structured government where, and I've talked about this, where we don't have to rely on Mr. Murphy's services, as great as they are, anytime we have a vacancy or any conflict between the charter and the actual structure of our government that was, to Councilor Johnston's point, perhaps overseen when we went to a staggered terms. And as Citizen Gun, I oppose that because I foresaw that once you throw everything out of complete sequence, there are going to be unforeseen consequences. And one of them might be the inability of this council, except at 4-year intervals, to change anything in the charter that may make it difficult for us to actually, do business or handle a situation where we have a vacancy, et cetera. But I would like to just think that with the controversy from the CMP line, which we all have an opinion on, or at the very least we're all sick of seeing the ads, I'd like to think that we'll get those extra voters out there, and while they're expressing their rage or delight one way or the other, that they will see what we offer on the ballot and hopefully give us a vote one way or the other on these charter changes. And while I do recognize the resources involved, if we don't reach the threshold, we don't reach the threshold, and perhaps we can revisit it next year. But I don't think, I think under the circumstances, since council didn't foresee these difficulties before they changed the charter to go to staggered elections, that we owe it to the public to at least make an effort to fix things while we have the effort to. And I said, well, I know it's going to be close. I think the effort's worthwhile, and that's it.
Thank you. Any further question or discussion? Councilor Archer.
Yeah, this was actually a question to the city clerk, Michelle Hughes. This threshold that exists, if you have people that just come in to vote for council and don't vote, this threshold applies to each charter amendment.
Yes.
So if people just voted just for the state issue, that actually hurts us trying to get to our threshold. Because they're then not voting on, you have people that just vote on certain things. Like they won't vote for a city councilor, you'll see blanks.
Correct.
And you'll recognize that as their blanks. Those blanks will hurt us in meeting this threshold?
Well, no, usually they vote for the charter amendments and stuff like that. So each ward will have its own separate ballot.
Yes, that's correct.
It's total number, it's totality number of voters that actually vote. Whether they vote on this specific issue or that specific issue, it's the totality of voters that come in, get their ballots, and vote. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it wouldn't hurt us then, if they just come in and vote for one issue.
Any further discussion? A roll call vote on the Charter Amendment number 3, item H, that was made by Councilor McPhail, seconded by Councilor Gunn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item I, a first reading, Charter Amendment Number 4, Section 2.05, Election and Terms, page 145 in your packet, and that is Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter. As described in MRSA, Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104, the process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the election and term of the deputy mayor. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 2.5, Election and Term, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. So the strike-through language used to include the deputy mayor shall exercise all powers of the mayor during temporary absence or disability of the mayor. I'm just wondering if we should actually include that back in the changes. I mean, the way it's written, it just says there'll be a deputy mayor. Yeah, I think, obviously, we understand, but being clear on it would make sense to me.
Councilor Johnston, would you like to make that a motion to add in the sentence beginning with, in the event of a vacancy in the office of a mayor, deputy mayor shall assume the office of the mayor?
So moved.
Councilor Johnston has made the amendment. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second. Oh,
Second by Councilor Berman. On the amendment only. Any discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment only. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion as amended. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion on the main motion as amended, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item J, a first reading, Charter Amendment Number 5, Section 2.07, Powers and Duties of the Mayor, on page 145 in your packet. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter. As described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104, the process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the appointments of members of municipal boards and commissions. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 207, Powers and Duties of the Mayor, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not certain how to go about wordsmithing this, but I certainly appreciate, I think it was Councilor Gunn that added this because it kind of clarifies what we already do in council procedures and puts it into charter, but I think that if we could phrase it somehow that, councilors will be assigned, in an as equal manner as possible. I would, hate to see in the event you have a mayor in the future that just decides to put one councilor or two councilors on every single board without kind of, spreading it out. So I don't know if that's an amendment or if staff can work on crafting that into something that flows well here.
City Administrator Canadath, can we work on a possible amendment for the next reading of this?
I think so. We have City Clerk Hughes and City Solicitor Murphy here. I'll just ask them, does that sound reasonable? Do we have enough to work on an amendment here? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councilor Johnston, you may see an amendment that bears your
Thank you.
your request. Any further discussion? Councilors?
Sorry.
Any further discussion?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it when we get to the...
Hearing nobody or seeking recognition, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 as amended, or excuse me, it may be amended in the future. Item K, first reading, Charter Amendment Number 6, Section 6.06, City Council Action on the Municipal Budget, page 147 in your packet. Counselor Johnston.
The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the charter as described in MRSA Title 38, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item will be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the municipal and school board's budget. We've got several exhibits. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 6.06, the City Council Action on the Municipal Budget, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Archer. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item L, and that is a first reading, Charter Amendment Number 7, recall, page 149 in your packet. And that is Counselor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the charter. As described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104, the process for making amendments to the charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the number of signatures and form of ballots associated with recalls. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 8.3, Recall, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Counselor Gunn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, a roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item M, a first reading, Charter Amendment Number 8, Section 9.02, Limitations, and that is page 151 of your packet, and that is Counselor Johnston.
The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the charter as described in MRSA Title 38, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on former employees and/or elected officials doing business with the city. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 9.02, Limitations, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Gunn. Any discussion? Counselor Berman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. At our last discussion, I thought the intent of this motion was to prevent city employees at a certain level or above, perhaps directors or assistant directors, from doing business with the city for a period of 1 year after termination of their employment. As written, this would seem to preclude teachers, police officers, public works employees, and all others from doing any business with the city for 1 year after their employment. And I'm wondering if we can, in the spirit of getting amendments from staff, if we can see an amendment suggesting the proper level at which we should prohibit doing business with the city following their employment.
City Administrator Canrath, can we make sure that there's a potential amendment for Counselor Berman at the public hearing and second and final reading?
Sure. Did you want to make the amendment now, or you want us to draft something and then do it?
I don't have an opinion as to the proper level of what that would be, and I'm wondering if the staff can advise me on that.
Okay. And you're looking at department head level or above?
Or something equivalent.
Okay.
If that's an assistant director or associate director, or whatever the ethics of that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Any for Councilor McPhail?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like more clarification on the reason for the 2-year period as to what that really will be representing versus the 1 year. I mean, I understand the 1 year, but I think 2 years may be a little extreme, and what the thought process might be on that.
I believe this is a Councilor Johnston amendment. Councilor Johnston, do you have a reason for the intent? I can see that no former employee and no former mayor may, for a period of time, 1 year from their termination, be employed, and then you have or advise for a period of 2 years. Was there a reason for that separation?
No, I think the way I asked it be drafted was for a year, but I assumed there was a reason for it. And then my only other question, since I see Mr. Murphy approaching, I just want to make certain that the language doesn't preclude anybody from just bringing an application before the planning board or anything that was personal to them, because the way I initially read this, I wasn't 100% certain. I think it's there, but I just would hate for, you know, a former city councilor to bring a project and be told they can't lobby in front of a planning board. But maybe there's something with the actual definition of lobby.
So my apologies to the council. I wasn't at the prior meeting, so we were working off kind of notes from what the goal was. So the 2-year, it is often the case in these sorts of public officials' ethics rules where a generic one-year rule will apply to a person before any city board, but a longer rule will apply if they're going back specifically to the board or the entity where they did the majority of their work. So as an example, where the city planner, to come back to the planning board, they would have a longer burden to allow more of a dissipation of the familial connections between the planning board and the planner. The wisdom of that, though, is for all of you, not for me. Understanding that the council was interested in this topic, I kind of looked to see what other approaches have been used in the past. I'm not married to the 2-year. It's an idea that's thrown out a longer time period for cases where there's a very tight connection between the official and the public body. But if that's not of interest to you, it's easily struck and easily revised. This is me as wordsmith trying to understand where you all are going, and certainly happy to amend it as you all think best.
Solicitor Murphy, this doesn't, as Councilor Johnston asked, this doesn't prevent any former councilor from coming and lobbying, or a former member of, you know, the public that worked in the city lobbying on any general project before any committee.
It would for 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah. So, for instance, if I was on the planning board, and then within a year of my leaving, I came with a housing development to the planning board, that wouldn't be allowed, Nathan. That's the idea, that the person cannot benefit from the relationships that they've established, such that the public would have questioned that the board is acting in a neutral capacity. I had an example early on, it was a city matter, in fact, where we were before the Human Rights Commission, and the attorney on the other side had literally 1 month earlier been a board member of the Human Rights Commission. And I argued vociferously that the city was at a disadvantage because they knew her, they liked her, they had a loyalty relationship to her. And I thought it was completely unfair to the city that she would sit on a matter where she had that recently been a board member. That argument went nowhere. But I think all of you recognize that it's a legitimate position, that it would be unfair to the public to think that a former official might be manipulating their inherent advantages. But certainly 1 year is very typical.
Thank you. Council Archer?
Yeah, since I'm actually piggybacking, my concern was the specific term "on their own behalf," because once you draft it, once we put it out there, that's what it is. My concern is if I want to do something to my own property that requires me to go to the board. To petition the government is a constitutional right. Now, I'm on my own behalf. I think there's a little bit different than for profit, which we do list, but we also said for not-for-profit. My concern is that we shouldn't be prohibiting anybody from a right to change their housing. There's a lot of things that aren't to that level. I actually agree with you with the Maine Human Rights Commission. I mean, that's definitely a quasi-judicial board with some, and there's money being paid to that person, most likely. I don't want that to apply to just standard city operations from a citizen, whether or not they're past staff, things like that. And I don't know if that was the intent of this council. It wasn't mine. Again, maybe we make it very specified that these individuals can petition for changes to their property, things to that nature. Put a contract zone amendment out, things that a traditional citizen has to the board.
Yeah, that's easy to add.
The normal stuff. Yeah, not for money making. Thanks.
Gotcha. Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Johnston, follow-up?
Thank you. I think when, I first read this, I think that Mr. Murphy really captured what I was trying to say, but couldn't come up with the words very well. But yet, my only real concern was, as Councilor Archer just stated, like if I was coming forward to do a single-family home, not a housing project, my intent was if I was going to do a subdivision, I would obviously hire out somebody else to represent me, and I wouldn't be before a planning board lobbying. So as long as we can get it like that, this is really exactly what I wanted.
The consensus of the council is the 1 year and a window of opportunity for people for personal matters.
It seems that that's the consensus of the council for a potential amendment for the next reading.
We'll have it for you next week.
Thank you.
Sure. Happy to.
Any further discussion on this item? Item M. Roll call vote on item M. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item N, a first reading. Charter Amendment Number 9, Section 9.03, Judge of Qualification, page 153 in your packet, and that is Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter. As described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104, the process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by council. Additionally, if approved by the council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on removal of individuals from boards, bodies, and commissions. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading of the charter amendments included in the document titled Saco City Charter Amendment, Section 9.3, Judge of Qualification, and further move to schedule a public hearing for September 7th, 2021, before a vote to add to the November referendum.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Seeing no hands raised, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item O, a public hearing / final reading, Charter Amendment Number 1, Section 2.06, Vacancies, Forfeiture of Office, and Filling of Vacancies, page 155 in your packet. Councilor Gunn. Item O.
Council Resources listed as Councilor Purdy. Councilor Purdy.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Purdy. Thank you.
Thank you. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by Council. Additionally, if approved by the Council, the item would be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the steps to be taken in case of a vacancy in the position of mayor or councilor. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn to open the public hearing. Any discussion? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. The public hearing is now open at 8:20 p.m. If there's members of the public that would like to speak on this item, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody coming forward to be heard, Councilor Purdy.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy, second by Councilor Berman to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say everything in the language is fine by me, except there was something missing from the original charter language that was pretty much erased in favor of this language, and it concerns the situation that would happen if either the mayor, if either the council or the school board, we haven't gotten to the school board yet though, but I'm including it for the purposes of this, this language though, but it really only refers to the council. If we get in a situation where there's a vacancy in the council and we have about 30 days under the old language, or in this case 21 days, for the council to nominate and appoint a successor councilor that would serve out the remainder of the year, as we all agreed in the previous reading, that's perfectly fine. However, the previous charter language did have a fail-safe in case the charter, in case the school board or the council deadlocked or failed to fill the seat. And that fail-safe was that if the council had 30 days to fill the seat, and if we didn't fill the seat, then the mayor would fill the seat. In this case, obviously not for the remainder of the full term, but until the end of the year. And I had offered that, I had suggested that as an amendment in correspondence with Ms. Hughes, though, and I'm surprised it was not included in here because I thought it would just be included for everybody's benefit. It really wasn't that much of a difference. It was just bringing something back that was left out from the previous language. That, and like I said, it's rarely, seldom ever going to be used, but I don't ever want to be in a situation where a future council deadlocks on a candidate or something, and we have a situation where we go 6-8 months where one ward is not represented. I think in that situation it would be prudent as a fail-safe, if the council can't appoint somebody, then the mayor can appoint a qualified person to fill out the remainder of that year, and then following our new language, we elect someone, the city elects somebody to fill out the remainder of the term.
Councilor Gunn, are you making an amendment? I think you're talking about section C2, the struck-out language that says if the city council fails to make such an appointment within 30 days, the mayor shall appoint an eligible person to fill the unexpired term within 10 days thereafter. Are you making an amendment to the...
Well, as I said, it's partially that, though, because it's instead of the unexpired term, it would just fill to the end of the year. So, again, because of the language that we're going to have, if we pass the amendment, it would just, if the council appoints somebody, it's to fill the end of the year. And like I said, the council can't do that. I like to think they could, but if they couldn't, I'd like to see the mayor have the power to at least fill the seat so there isn't a vacancy.
So are you making an amendment?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. An amendment's been made by Councilor Gunn to input that if the council is unable to fill the open position, that the mayor would be able to fill the position within 10 days, which is currently in the charter now. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I support that. My only concern, and it really dates back to the way it's currently written, is how we define, I don't have it right in front of me. Could you read back what's currently in the charter? I guess my concern is the council fails, like, if it's going to fail, it should at least attempt. And so it doesn't control the agendas, so therefore my concern is going forward, you, again, could potentially have a mayor that says, well, I just won't put it on the agenda, and then the council has a failed, and then they get to a point. So as long as that's taken care of, I wholeheartedly support. Obviously, if we go through the motions of the 21 days and accept applications, then it's just a deadlock. We can't make a decision. I'm totally all behind the mayor making the decision at that point.
Thank you. Councilor Berman?
I think Councilor Johnston makes a strong point. I also will admit to being a little confused about the exact language of the current amendment because we're not fulfilling the term as written in the crossed out language, but fulfilling a portion of the term until the next municipal election. And given the amount of wordsmithing that's occurring on the fly here for a situation that seems to be pretty unlikely, I might suggest that we pass the language as written and fix these problems in a future amendment.
Councilor Archer?
This is the final, correct? We are
Yes.
voting on this now, so the best motion would be to table.
Unless you table it to the next meeting,
I'll do it if you don't, but you brought it up, Councilor Burnham.
My suggestion was that we vote on the language as written now and make a future amendment to address Councilor Gunn's issues. If you'd like to motion to table, you can do so.
Councilor Archer?
Motion to table, just to clear this up, because we are about to vote on this and we can't change it after the fact. So it's best just to table it, clean it up, and I'm willing to vote forward. I agree, the same reasons.
So you would like to table the entire motion, not just the amendment, but the entire motion, because we are on an amendment at this
That's
point.
correct. Yes, in this case, we'd have to table the amendment and then table the main motion. So I make a motion to table the amendment till our next meeting.
Councilor Archer has made a motion to table the amendment. Is there a second? To table the amendment?
I will second it.
Councilor Gunn? Back to the main motion.
Mr. Mayor, we have to vote on the table.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Roll call vote on the motion to table. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to table passes 7-0. Back to the main motion. Councilor Purdy?
Yes, sorry. This charter amendment as written originally before the amendment 2 weeks ago would have had the mayor appointing a new councilor with a two-third or a supermajority vote. Where that was changed, I wonder if the supermajority vote is still necessary in this amendment. Just curious for discussion on that point. Thank you. Where it was that supermajority, I feel that supermajority vote was meant as a check on the mayor. I think that maybe it should be amended to go back to a simple majority. And because the reason for it is, yeah, thank you.
Perhaps it might be wise to make a motion to table this item and bring your amendments forward in writing to the city administrator so that at the next meeting, the draft is drafted appropriately, and therefore you can vote on it as a whole rather than piecemealing it together with what you may or may not want. So is there a motion to table?
I'll make the motion.
Councilor Purdy's made a motion to table. Is there a second? Councilor Johnston, roll call vote to table. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to table until the next meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, I just want to be clear on something. So we have tabled both the amendment that I offered as well as the full motion. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. So if you want that amendment in, just email Brian and it'll go to the next reading.
That is my intent, though. So hopefully everyone will the council be able to receive the language of what my intent was beforehand so we can review it all? Or, because, I mean, obviously I don't want to break the public meeting law, a rule by putting in a group email or something of that nature.
As soon as you send it out to Brian, it'll enter into the packet and then everyone can see your intent.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
So,
City Administrator Canrad.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify an intent, so these proposed amendments are going to be emailed in to our office, and we're going to incorporate them into this document for you to vote on the next meeting,
Yes,
rather than just offering the amendments tonight.
yes.
Okay.
So that we make sure that the language is very clear and unambiguous as to what the desires of the certain councilors that have brought forward, what their desires are. Because as many know, there is a lot of wordsmithing going on, and we want to make sure that we get this right because, as you've seen with other charter amendments, there have been unintended consequences.
So we're anticipating two amendments, one from Councilor Gunn, which was tabled, and one from Councilor Purdy, which he was just off. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so item O is tabled until our next meeting. Item P, a public hearing, final reading, Charter Amendment Number 2, 4.01, School Department and School Board, page 158 in your packet, and that is Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council endeavors to make a few amendments to the Charter, as described in MRSA Title 30A, Chapter 111, Section 2104. The process for making amendments to the Charter requires a public hearing before a vote by Council. Additionally, if approved by the Council, the item will be voted in referendum by the public in November. This amendment focuses on the steps to be taken in the case of a vacancy on the school board. I move to open the public hearing.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote to open the public hearing. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to open the public hearing at 8:32 p.m. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak on this matter, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody seeking recognition, Councilor Berman.
I move to close the public hearing. Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman, second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? Councilor Gunn?
As I had earlier indicated, since this deals essentially the duplicate version of what the school board would have to do in the terms of vacancy as opposed to what the council has to do, I would be interested also in putting an amendment forward. Again, if the school board cannot fill the vacancy, now to have the mayor fill the vacancy, again, until the end of that year. And in this case, I was going back and forth between whether or not the mayor or the chair of the school board should do it. But I think if the member of the school board is a voting member of the school board, if the school board again deadlocks or is unable to fill the vacancy, the mayor, as the presiding officer, has an obligation to fill the seat again until the end of the year, so the ward is represented.
Okay, are you going to present that as
I present that
as an amendment?
I present that as an amendment.
It may be wise to table this item as well, and to allow any amendments to move to the city administrator, and therefore so they can be incorporated as potential amendments, and so that the language is mirrored and the language is correct. Councilor Berman.
Mr. Mayor, once again, to avoid wordsmithing of charter amendments on the fly, I move to table this motion such that the amendments can be submitted to the city administrator and put forth in a packet for council to consider.
Councilor Berman's made a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer. Roll call vote to table. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hanch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to table passes 7-0. That brings us to item 10, new business. There's one item, and that is marijuana discussion. City Administrator Canrath.
Thank you. I think you are all aware of the recent interest of a property on Main Street for a retail marijuana operation. That brought us to consider a moratorium, a 61-day moratorium that was offered by our city solicitor probably about 50 days ago now. And so we obviously need to have the discussion of the opt-in piece. We have our city solicitor, Tim Murphy, here this evening. I don't know, Tim, if you want to give a little brief overview, reminder also to start out with, and then obviously for council to discuss and consider.
Thank you, Brian. The legislature has given all of you the authority to consider whether to embrace regulatory authority over marijuana in the community, and if so, what nature of marijuana and what level of regulation are you looking for? Or you can simply not avail yourself of those opportunities. But until some decision is made, marijuana use is essentially in a box on hold. So it would be up to you as the policymakers to decide whether you want to send that out for consideration. We had suggested to you an emergency moratorium so that the matter could be studied. That emergency ordinance is going to expire, I believe, on the 28th, Michelle? Yeah. In the meantime, I believe the planning board is starting to take up zoning review of marijuana so that they can make a recommendation to you as a body on how to handle this. So it is being looked at by the appropriate city bodies that need to study it. But you are facing now a new deadline of the 28th. So,
Tim, is the first question maybe whether we want to extend the moratorium or not? And can we extend it one time? Is that accurate? Or?
Yeah, you can definitely extend it if that's of interest.
So since this is at the planning board currently, it might make sense to do a one-time extension.
That
allow
would
that process to play out.
a one-time extension would afford you 61 more days with status quo. That's more than enough time for the planning board to come back with a recommendation on zoning changes for you to consider. So I would recommend that as your first step.
Thank you. Councilor Berman, then Councilor Johnston. Councilor Berman.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, part of the discussion around the proposed business on Main Street and the moratorium involved this concept of opt-in and opting in to what I think is called adult use retail marijuana in the state of Maine. There's another regulatory scheme, as I understand it, called medical marijuana, which might also fall under a caregiver type of license or a situation. And I've become a little bit confused about how the city is treating these different aspects. For example, our current zoning seems to me to allow caregivers to exist in certain places, and we typically also append the words nonprofit to them when we mention caregivers. Then there seems to be a retail or maybe a for-profit type of caregiver, which I believe was the type of business that was being proposed to exist in a lot of main streets. And I don't believe that caregiving falls into this opt-in framework by the state. in contrast to the adult use regulatory framework, which does have this opt-in type of framework. And I'm wondering if you can clarify for me where the city currently is on adult use opting in versus caregiving, whether we treat nonprofit caregiving as separate from a for-profit medical retail, and what our current ordinance allows or doesn't allow.
So there's a lot of ambiguity related to marijuana. David Toomey stayed tonight for this very topic. Originally, when we drafted our zoning ordinances, there were no for-profit marijuana dispensaries dispensing marijuana. It was perceived as a medical need only, done by nonprofits. Since those definitions were put in place, the state has altered, as I understand it, has altered its definitions such that you can actually have for-profit businesses now. And the distinctions, essentially, while their state of Maine has regulatory distinctions between adult use and medical, it is now so easy to get a medical card. You can go online today and get a medical card for, our research showed about $50, and you'll be given a medical card. Essentially, in the real world, in the legislature, they still see differences between the two, but in the real world, there doesn't appear to be a whole lot anymore, as anyone who's interested in having marijuana products can easily get them by getting a card. So it has created this sort of Wild West, if you will, where it's unclear what regulations are allowed on what parts, but one thing the legislature made clear, at least as to adult use, was this has to be, you have to choose to do this. You have to choose, your community has to choose to participate. And until it does, everything's on hold. Medical would still go forward, but there's legitimate public policy question now whether for-profit is really, in essence, now medical, or is it just essentially become profit? It's become a business, and your customers now can just, you have an unlimited stream of customers because an unlimited number of people essentially can get a medical card. So it's really quite a mess, is the way I'd describe it.
Of course, Walgreens is also a for-profit company that sells medical pharmaceuticals, so the for-profit and medical aren't necessarily in contradiction.
That's true, but the typical Walgreens will not have the potential adverse neighborhood effects that a retail marijuana facility may have. I mean, the potential odors that come from marijuana can be debilitating to those people who find that smell offensive. That isn't the case with a Walgreens, generically. So the decision whether to use the product is completely up to other people, but there are known consequences. Saco, in fact, had originally intended through the council to zone the use into a particular area because of these potential adverse effects. And unfortunately, that part of that regulatory scheme didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to completely, and so that may be something you all feel you need to correct. But I'd call it the Wild West out there a bit. So.
Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Archer. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Obviously, we're not voting tonight, but I would throw my support behind drafting an extension for next week. I think that Attorney Murphy has raised some very good points. There's a lot to unpack here, regardless of how you feel about marijuana as a whole. And as he just indicated, it was the intent during the zoning revision to address this because we felt it was such a large topic at a separate time. I mean, you're talking about design standards if you're going to allow it, conditions that you're going to look, to put on these uses, and clearly we don't have any of that, nor have we really discussed that with the community. I mean, my sister lives in Los Angeles, and she'll be the first to tell you exactly what happens when it's not well regulated. So I just would support, the 61-day extension, and hopefully we, move pretty steadfast on figuring out what is appropriate. Thank you.
Council Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could have the city attorney come back up. I saw you walking away, but I didn't want to interrupt Councilor Johnson. This is more information I'm trying to learn. You did a great job confusing me, and I guess that's what lawyers do, with the concept of medical and for sale. And many people know that when there's a complex idea, complex thought, I like to simplify it or connect it to something I know, because it will help me apply it to future discussions. Would you say it's fair to say, you were talking about how just legislative, this is just a mess. Would you say it's fair to say it would be like the state licensing adult use of alcohol and then medical use of alcohol and making them completely different, one under a health and human services field, one's under our tobacco and alcohol field? Is that something similar? Like if I was to try to break it down that way, because I'm trying to understand the difference between the two.
Well, really, the problem is the legislation perceives two worlds, a medical world and a...
But how do we apply that to Saco is where I get confused. And that's where I want more information.
And that's what we need to decide. Are we going to treat them differently? Are we going to decide we want to have use? And opt-in is answering the question, do you want adult use marijuana? And if so, in what form, shape, manner, and location? Are you going to regulate it? Now, Saco has had a long history of allowing marijuana uses. So it's not, this community has not been opposed to the use, but the community through the planning board and through the council has at least reviewed it as a zoning matter, and at one point we had some life safety regulations. Those have since expired. So we realized when one of the applications came forward recently that, we're in a situation where it's unclear what the state, where we are with regard to the state. And our own regulations have expired, so we need to address this because clearly the public is interested in this issue. And so you, I think, have ultimately the decision on how you're going to handle it. So I don't have an easy answer for you other than, we've been in this field and we're trying to get it to the right place.
And this is policy, and I know you traditionally stay away, you stay clear, and that's what you do. You advise. Is there any, again, there's not that clear separation. I mean, there is, but there isn't on the two uses. Do we have to apply precedence thinking, consistency thinking? And I know this is policy, and I'm just asking for advice. How would a court, I guess the best way, how would a court look like? How would a court look at this if I ever got there? You didn't apply, you had a precedence, you're not following it now, you don't have consistency.
Yeah, I get where you're going, Counselor. And what I would say is marijuana is such a unique product, as is liquor, that it's not going to be viewed like regulating lemonade stands, where to place shoe stores. It's a different cat. And so courts are going to look to see if we follow state rules, which we will, and provided we do, we'll be fine. But it is a unique product.
So it would be fair to say that we could allow medical use, but we could be a dry city, because that is applied in the alcohol term sense. You could be a dry city for
you can retain medical and opt not to do adult use. And that's a perfectly legitimate choice. But as I noted to Councilor Berman, the lines have become so blurred now by the ability to get a medical card that it's almost an illusion to argue that the two are somehow distinct.
And that's the blendingness.
Yeah.
Because I can just say I have a headache and I might get.
I mean, if you can go on the internet and talk to an internet doctor and for $50 get a card, we've essentially de facto created everyone is a patient, for $59. So that essentially makes the point of adult use kind of meaningless because you can get your marijuana a separate way. But that's for the legislature to solve, not for us. I'm just noting it.
But we just have to apply with what we have in front of us, we have to apply
It's a
that.
practical problem we have, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Berman, then Councilor Gunn.
Yeah, thank you. Two quick points. One is, I'm not sure I share the city solicitor's dim view of telemedicine. I think some good medicine can be done over the internet. But second, I'm still a little confused, and this is an honest area of confusion. At the discussion around the moratorium, there was significant conversation about whether or not we'd opted in to adult use. But I was confused at the time as to the relevance of that to the proposed medical marijuana dispensary, which doesn't seem to be an opt-in system with the states. And once again, we're using these words about whether or not we want to opt in.
Yep.
And although I realize there's considerable confusion between these two schemes, as you've pointed out, it seems to me that one requires opting in and one doesn't. And so we need to be careful about how we talk about proceeding, because we could not opt in but still have medical dispensaries, as I understand it.
I think that's mostly correct, that opt-in is addressing adult use. However, that's, in a pure world, in the world we're actually living in, we have this situation where there is no longer a difference. The legislature may call them two different things and have regulatory schemes, but essentially they've really become so blurred that it's hard to. The facility on Main Street was one element in the need for emergency legislation. It was not the sole reason. There were other reasons. We found that some of our own regulations were inadequate, they had expired, and we hadn't actually reviewed the opt-in provisions, and so time was right to it just came to the perfect storm where a bunch of factors came together and said, it's appropriate time for the council to act.
No, I appreciate that. I guess the nature of my question is, we could choose not to opt in, but that wouldn't preclude that same business from appearing in that same location, despite a failure to opt in because they're a medical dispensary as opposed to an adult use.
I don't want to argue, I don't want to agree with you because we may end up in court, and I'm not exactly on board with you on that point.
Okay.
I think lawyers could argue about that.
Perfect, thank you.
So
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is also a question for Mr. Murphy as well as Mr. Cainrath. So I just want to make sure the public's clear on the procedure here. Is the planning board essentially going to act as if, are they working with the question, and the question being, if the council is going to choose to opt in, these are the parameters we want, these are where we want it zoned, et cetera, or is the planning board approaching this like they would any other matter where they're going to perhaps come up with those parameters but actually recommend to us as a formal recommendation to actually opt in or not, though? Because I want to know, going into this, are we going to contend with the planning board offering their own opinion whether we should be opting in or not, or are we just putting out to them the particulars of it and then we make the final decision? And I think the public needs to know how clear that's going to be.
So I haven't met with the planning board, I haven't talked with the planning board, I haven't consulted with them, so I'm not exactly sure. My understanding is that they're going to present you some zoning ideas that you as the council can consider adopting as the policymakers of the city. Opt-in is not their call. Zoning is their call.
I just want to make sure the public's clear on that.
And I want to be clear that I haven't spoken with them. So this is just my understanding, Counselor.
Okay.
And my guess is the city planner can tell you exactly. So I'm sure Mr. Garnham can send you that information if you need it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. It was just brought to our first meeting on the 3rd for a special workshop. With the changes in the planning department now, I don't know when we have it set to be discussed again. So again, like you said, timing-wise, we have a meeting next week, and I will bring it up to ask when the next agenda workshop will be for it, and it will be zoning only. They will give recommendations of where they feel, and we can do it on both. If we do this, this would be the zoning. If we go this way, this would be the zoning. So those are things that I can bring forth in the workshop to have discussed.
Councilor Hatch?
Attorney Murphy, I just want a clarification, just a bit of education for me. I understand the opt-in for adult use, but do we have an option to preclude medical use? Or are we mandated to have some area where that's available?
You can zone medical to areas you think it's appropriate. And once upon a time, the council did believe that some areas of the city were amenable to medical dispensaries. Again, that was in the old days when medical dispensaries were a somewhat different animal.
Gotcha.
And the legislature has since expanded, as I understand it, the concept of dispensaries. David, is that? Yeah, yeah. So,
But we have to provide that opportunity?
no, no.
So that's an option. I'm going to the extreme.
That was a legislative decision of the council back years ago, 2010, 2011. The city decided to get out ahead of this and have places where medical marijuana would be permitted. So in fact, I would say we were probably one of the early adopters of that option.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilor Archer?
Yeah, this may be more for the council, or actually, you may actually know this answer as well, is we brought this on the floor as an emergency, so there's a 60-day limit. However, if we get this on the agenda potentially, we could make it longer, correct?
If it goes,
If we
Yeah,
get it on the agenda before the meeting, we don't need to have the 60-day limit. We can make it 90, we can make it, is it a maximum 6 months? Actually, I don't think there is.
you could make it a regular piece of legislation.
So maybe we don't apply it as an emergency and we apply it as standard business for next week. That way we have more than 60 days.
If it's an ordinance, it's going to have to go through the 3-meeting approach.
Or a moratorium?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then it will have to fall under emergency.
So I just want to point out that we did create an ordinance, Chapter 135 on marijuana cultivation and distribution back in 2017. It was adopted by council, so. City Solicitor, sorry that you went back to your seat.
You're getting your exercise tonight.
Since we are actually in a meeting, and council can take action tonight,
It can.
because even though this is under new business, and we treat new business as a workshop to bring new items forward, but even so, because we were in an official meeting, we can adopt an motion tonight on the floor
The charter.
to extend a moratorium for 61 days following the expiration date of August 28th.
You can enact an emergency moratorium tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Archer.
Mr. Mayor, under section 2.08 Echo, I'd like to put an emergency order for extend the emergency, the current emergency moratorium that expires 8/28 and extend it for additional 60 days after.
Second.
Motions have been made by Councilor Archer, second by Councilor Johnston, to do a second moratorium extension beginning on the day after August 28th, and going out 60 days from that date.
Should it be 61, are we limited?
Is it 61, Tim, or 61 days from that date?
61 days, yes.
That is the motion. Any discussion? Councilor Berman.
Mr. Mayor, when we enacted the last 61-day moratorium, the purpose was for the city council and the city to become educated as to marijuana policy and the place it fits within our city. Now, a mere 5 days before the extension of that moratorium, we have our first discussion as council. I would like to see substantially more progress made before the expiration of the next moratorium. This is here, it's in the state, it's in our neighboring communities, it's hurting our community and business owners who would like to do business with our city to live in this current state of limbo. We cannot just keep kicking the can down the road. We need to educate ourselves and take affirmative action in one direction or the other.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Gunn.
I want to associate myself with the comments of Councilor Berman. I said this months ago that this has been on the docket way too long, and I'm prepared for this. I'm prepared, and I expect this council to vote up or down on this one way or the other. So we are either going to have adult use marijuana in this city or we're not. And I'm tired of the wait, and I'm sure the business owners out there, including whether they're on one way or the other, and especially ones that could potentially be add to the revenue of this city if they decide to do business with the city, are a little tired of waiting, and if they don't go here, they're going to go elsewhere. So I am prepared to vote on this, and I want everyone to know that I hope that the council does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gunn. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the emergency 61-day moratorium following August 28th. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
No.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item 11 of the agenda, and administrative updates. City Administrator Kenrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Saco Conservation Interactive Story Map, if you have not seen this, Economic Development Specialist Joseph Berna has recently worked with the Saco Concom and local students to create and develop an interactive story map to highlight the city's natural beauty and accessibility. The map showcases 16 trails, beaches, and parks that include GPS-enabled trail maps and essential details about each site. Please check it out at sacomaine.org/explore. This has been a really great project and tremendous work done by all involved. A thank you to all those involved in the Jubilee Island Music Series. It was an inaugural year this year, and it was a great success. As the season wraps up, we should be proud to offer another summer music concert venue for the citizens of Saco and the surrounding community. This interesting has also been great for bringing attention to a very underutilized and often overlooked city park along the river. So we got lots of positive comments about people who are just rediscovering Jubilee Island for the first time, or maybe for coming back after not seeing it for quite a while. City Administrator open office hours for city employees. So like I do for the public on a monthly basis, I'm going to begin offering open office hours meetings for city employees to come and share their thoughts, views, feedback, concerns, or anything else they'd like to come and tell me. This is an open session, no appointment or agendas required, and the discussion can be on any topic they choose. Our first session will be September 1st from 3 to 4:30 in my office here on the second floor of City Hall. Of course, all city employees are welcome and encouraged to attend. One final reminder, last call for nomination petitions for those who may be interested in running for City Council or School Board. Wards 1, 3, and 6 on the City Council are up this year. Wards 1, 3, 5, and 7 on the School Board. You need 35 signatures, and those petitions are due back to City Clerk Michelle Hughes by September 3rd at 4 p.m. Lastly, just want to announce and remind all Saco City employees that we have a new initiative from our HR department for employee appreciation, and that is a scoop from the Scoop. So on Thursday, August 26th, all city employees can go down to the Saco Scoop on Main Street from noon to 9 p.m. and receive a free scoop of ice cream. This is a great way for us to partner with a great Main Street organization and business downtown, and also show our appreciation for city employees, especially during the time of the pandemic. So all city employees, please, this Thursday, head down to Saco Scoop between 12 noon and 9 p.m. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, City Administrator Kenrath. Any questions? Okay, moving on. Item 12, any council discussion and comment? Council Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to the city administrator, the mayor, about I did receive a compliment from a constituent. She is 5 years old, and she is my daughter. She enjoyed, and this goes to all the staff of Park and Recs, she enjoyed the summer rec program, and you will see me putting for next year as well. She had a blast. She came home tired. She came home cranky. That part I wish didn't happen, but that just tells me that the staff ran her dry, ran her empty, and just wanted to give the accolades to all the staff of Parks and Rec. So,
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So earlier tonight, I guess council didn't take action on the HPC ordinance, and as I had stated from the onset of that, I was not going to participate because my properties were involved in it, but I'm just curious now as to why council didn't feel the need to move it forward. And it is discussion period now, but if you want to address it offline, that's fine too. I just would like understanding as to why I went through that process to ultimately fail without a second. And then the other thing, it was a question that was posed to me, and I'm far from an expert in this area, and I do understand that the state changed the guidelines with the hybrid meeting model that we were using, but apparently there are communities that are still somehow utilizing that. And it was, again, a question was posed as to whether or not we could still do that. And I didn't have an answer, so I'm asking again, or I'm asking our administrator if you understand exactly what it is that, we can and cannot do specifically with Zoom. I think while many of us are happy to be back in person, there's a large segment of the population that really got accustomed to Zoom, and many, were participating for the first time. So if we could have some kind of, online participation, if that's allowed or not, going forward, I would be appreciated. Thank you.
So my understanding is a remote meeting policy is allowed to be crafted and put in effect now. We were kind of waiting, as the word has been made, Municipal Association is going to be having something coming forward as far as some draft or form sort of, or guidelines to use. We haven't seen that yet, but we are, as you know, with the legislation that came out this past session, allowed to craft a remote meeting policy, which we have not yet done, but which we intend to do. So that's something maybe we should be doing in the near term, and I could reach out to maybe Municipal Association for some guidance so we can maybe get started on that process.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be appreciated. I'd like to see that as soon as possible. I'm not certain, but I do believe that the city of Biddeford is currently doing something along those lines. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Any further council discussion and comment? Moving on. Item 13 for tonight is an executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
Be it ordered that the City Council enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, State Statute 405-6E, update from legal counsel.
Motion's been made by Councilor Archer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on entering executive session? Roll call vote to enter executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to enter executive session passes 7-0 at 9:09 p.m. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene in the conference room downstairs. Conference room downstairs in 5 minutes. Okay, it looks like we're all back. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to exit executive session.
So moved.
Councilor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Hatch was the second on that. On exiting executive session, any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion to exit executive session passes 7-0 at 10:03 p.m. Item 14, report from executive session. Is there any report?
No report.
No report at this time. At this time, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor Johnston, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on adjourning? Roll call vote to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 10:03. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.